What happens when ambition becomes your entire identity, when your only purpose is the crown? Starscream doesn't want to lead, he wants to rule. And every time he rises, he destroys everything around him. Across universes, he claws towards power, only to fall the moment he touches it. Because Starscream doesn't go quietly, he goes loudly, boldly, and always too soon. Starscream's story starts with a shattered crown. In the original Transformers G1 cartoon, he was second in command in name only, scheming, sniveling, always plotting Megatron's fall. And when he finally got his chance, when he left Megatron to die and claim leadership for himself, he threw a coronation, declared himself king, adorned himself with robes, trumpets, and applause. But then, Galvatron arrived. Starscream was obliterated in seconds, reduced to ash before he had ever had the chance to fulfill his life's mission. It wouldn't be the end. He returned as an immortal ghost, haunting others, even possessing Waspinator and Beast Wars to chase power once more. But one truth plagued his existence. He could claw his way to the top, but he had no idea what to do when he got there. Even death couldn't stop him. Starscream would return in new worlds, with sharper designs and darker edges. But no matter how modern the setting, his fatal flaws still remained. In Transformers Prime, Starscream finally gets what he always wanted. Megatron is presumed dead. The throne is empty, and Starscream seizes it without hesitation. But power doesn't make him stronger. It just reveals how truly weak he is. When Megatron returns, Starscream doesn't fight. He begs, he kneels, he offers up loyalty as a shield, but Megatron still breaks him. Exiled, humiliated, and alone, Starscream spends the rest of the series chasing scraps of influence, through ancient artifacts and hollow alliances, but never once reclaiming command. Because deep down, Transformers Prime shows us this. Starscream doesn't want to lead the Decepticons, he just wants to be seen as a leader. And nothing more. Starscream has failed as a follower, he's also failed as a leader. But what happens when he doesn't just gain power, and he's completely consumed by it? In Transformers Cyberverse, Starscream doesn't just reach the throne. With Quintesson interference, he fuses with the power of the Allspark. He becomes something godlike, something horrific, an eldritch horror. His body mutates, his mind fractures. He rules through fear, domination, and desecration. But even with all that power, he repeats the same mistakes he's made in Marvel Comics and the Prime Wars trilogy. He can't hold it. Because what Cyberverse and these other worlds show us is simple. Power never changed Starscream. It just showed us who he truly is. The ghost, the tyrant, the bottomless pit. And for once, he finally becomes the monster that Megatron knew him to be. But Starscream has always claimed that he'd be a better leader than Megatron. And when the war ended, he didn't wait for his chance. He created it. In the original IDW continuity, Starscream finally seizes control of Cybertron, not by earning it, but by orchestrating it. Amidst the chaos, he murders Metalhawk, framing it as a tragic casualty of war, positioning himself as a unifying voice of a new, factionless Cybertron. But the cracks show quickly. Starscream becomes paranoid, manipulative, desperate to prove he deserves what he stole. He wants peace, but doesn't know how to exist without conflict. Yet in the end, something changed. He confessed to everything, every lie, every crime. And when Unicron returned to devour the universe, it wasn't just Optimus Prime who made the final sacrifice. It was also Starscream. Activating the talisman, he dove into the monster's heart, ending it and him, forever etching his name into the survival of the universe. Not as a tyrant, not as a king, but as a ghost who finally found peace. In one universe, Starscream found peace at the very end, but in another, he found it by letting go, not as a consequence, but by choice. Transformers Armada gave us something rare, a Starscream who began the story as Megatron's enforcer, and ended it as something entirely different. He still thirsted for glory, still craved to prove himself, but for once, his ambition wasn't rooted in betrayal. Instead, it evolved. He began questioning Megatron, questioning the war, and over time, he formed a bond with the Autobots, a bond strong enough to shift his loyalty. When the battle reached its breaking point, Starscream didn't reach for the crown. He sacrificed himself, not for power, not for control, but to protect the world he once sought to conquer, and unite two opposing factions against a near unstoppable force. And in that moment, he achieved what no other version of him ever could: honor, clarity, and peace. Because Armada shows us this: the one time Starscream stopped chasing power, he finally became something worth remembering. Some characters rise to greatness, others rise to power. Starscream, he rises because he can't imagine a life where he doesn't. Across countless timelines, we see the same pattern: the hunger, the reach, the fall. Because for Starscream, ambition isn't a flaw. It's his entire identity. And when ambition is all you have, you'll betray everyone, lose everything, and destroy yourself trying to prove you deserve the throne in the first place. That's why every version of him crumbles, because he doesn't know who he is without the crown, except twice, In these rare timelines, he let it go. And in doing so, became something more than a traitor. He became a parable, not about obtaining power, but about letting it go. And maybe that's a lesson for us too. Because in a world that tells us to climb, conquer, and claim our place, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back and ask yourself, who are you without the crown? Thanks for watching, and as always, stay handsome.